Here's a fun fact. Did you know that lots of experts believe humans are born with only 2 fears? Just 2. What do you think they are?
Okay, I'll tell you the official answer. All of us are born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's what they say anyway. I'm no expert. All of the other fears that you have in life are acquired or learned fears.
They're fears that you have because of some experience you had or some situation you found yourself in, and now you have way more than just the 2 little fears you started out with. Now, most of us have lots of fears. There are literally thousands of them.
Some of us have some pretty common fears, like a fear of snakes or spiders or insects, a fear of heights, of drowning, or maybe even a fear of cats. But other people develop some very uncommon and weird fears, like the fear of feet, or the fear of balloons, or the fear of ducks. Yeah, ducks. Somewhere, a duck is watching you.
When I was a kid, I ordered my cheeseburgers plain. But who am I kidding? I still order them plain. The point is, I was all about the cheese and meat and not so into the sideshow. Veggies and toppings like ketchup and mustard were just a distraction to the real meal. So one day, I asked my dad to order a plain cheeseburger like no big deal, and the lady at McDonald's handed us a bag, and I was so hungry I tore into that thing really quick. But something was wrong, way wrong. An unidentified topping had snuck its way onto my sandwich, and it tasted like sour beet. It was a dill pickle. I spit it out, and from that day on, I had to double check every cheeseburger I ordered. I became obsessed and afraid of any sandwich with a bun. It could be concealing toppings. And if a dill pickle came with a meal, I made them leave it out. If it touched something on my plate, I didn't eat it. I didn't even look at a pickle for a few decades.
Now, in some ways, fears can be a good thing. Like they can protect us from harm or keep us from bad decisions, like falling off huge buildings, or from getting bit by a poisonous snake, or a spider, or duck. But there are some fears that don't help us at all. These fears, if we let them, really have the potential to hurt us.
These fears can keep us from experiencing all that God has to offer us. For instance, some of you have a fear of rejection. Now, I've never met a 2-year-old who's afraid of rejection, but somewhere along the way you acquired this fear. You fear that if people really knew who you are or what you're like, they won't like you anymore. You fear not being liked or being on the outside of the social scene. No one ever wants to get rejected.
Some of us have developed a fear of failure. Maybe you're afraid of not making the team or the right grades, so you live with the idea that you have to do everything right the first time, and the thought of making a mistake or letting someone down scares you to death.
Or maybe you have a fear of being embarrassed, or of being uncool or unattractive or alone. These are all real fears that a lot of us have, and fears are a big deal because when we let our fears control us, they have the ability to make us miss out on some really good things in life. The goal behind fear is for you to miss out on God's best for you, and God in no way wants that.
But what if you could live without fear? What if you could live instead with courage? How would that change your life? I bet all of us would like to be described as courageous people, not fearing rejection or embarrassment or failure or loneliness. But how do we do that? We're going to look at a story that gives us some insight into how we can step up and live courageous lives despite our fear.
Some of you may have heard the story of the Israelites leaving Egypt for the Promised Land. If you haven't, here's the gist. The Israelites were the people who God chose to make His own. God led them down to Egypt to escape a terrible famine. But while they were there, the Egyptians made them their slaves. God's people cried out to Him for help, and God sent a man named Moses to lead the people out of slavery.
And God set His people free. God, through Moses, promised to take the Israelites to an incredible new land of their very own, a land they called the Promised Land. But along the way, the Israelites started to lose hope and faith in God. They started making some bad choices. And today we're going to talk about one of those moments. After escaping Egypt, God brought His people to the Promised Land. When they arrived, they sent in 13 spies to get the lay of the land. The spies went in, and they found that the land was absolutely beautiful. It was everything they dreamed it would be. But there was one small problem.
There were giants living there. At least there were people who looked like giants to the Israelites. So when the spies came back to report to everyone what they saw, here's what they said. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. The spies went on to tell all of Israel that there was no way they could live there. They were too afraid. Now, in a lot of ways, you really can't blame them. Giants are scary, and going to war against giants, even more scary. Their fear was legitimate.
And guess what? Rejection, failure, being alone, being embarrassed, those are all legitimate fears too. But those fears can cause you to miss out on God's best. Because you're afraid of rejection or being alone, maybe you make a stupid decision to go along with the crowd. Maybe because you're afraid of embarrassment, you decide not to try out for the team. Fear can cause us to make bad decisions or miss out on something awesome. That's what happened to the Israelites. They were too afraid to go and conquer the land that God had promised them. All of the Israelites except two.
Two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a completely different view of things than the other spies. Here is what they said. And they said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them."
Everyone said that they couldn't take over the promised land except for these two spies. So what was it about them that made their response so different? How was it that Joshua and Caleb were able to see the same giants that the others saw, but still step up and have courage? The answer is simple. They trusted that what God had said was true. They knew God had said that this land was going to be their land, and so they took God at his word. Does that mean they weren't scared? No way. They probably were scared. But here's the thing about courage. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about trusting God and stepping up to follow him even though you're scared. That's real courage.
Now, there's something fundamental we all have to understand if we're going to overcome our fears. There's a big difference between believing in God and believing God. All of the other spies and all of Israel believed in God. At least they believed God existed. But when it came down to actually doing something about it, they didn't put their trust in God. They trusted that God existed, but they didn't trust that he would take care of them.
Do you know why you don't have to fear being rejected by friends? Because God says you're his child, and he's never gonna reject you. So their rejection doesn't define you. Believing that truth, it takes away the power of fear.
Do you know why you never have to fear being a failure at school or in sports or in anything in life? With God, you never have to worry about an outcome because he can use every situation and turn it around for your good. Believing that truth takes away the power of fear.
And I know, rejection, failure, embarrassment, and loneliness are real giant fears. But they don't have to control you and cause you to miss out on the good things of God. When God says, don't be afraid, he's not saying that you have to make yourself stop feeling fear. I don't know anyone who can do that. But he is saying, even if you're scared, trust me. I will take care of you. The other spies and the people of Israel ended up missing out on the promised land entirely because they let fear control them. God doesn't want you to miss out by letting fear control you.
He doesn't want you to miss an opportunity to do something great. He doesn't want you to miss out on a life where you are confident and brave. He wants you to step up, because when you feel afraid, God can be trusted. Joshua and Caleb believed God, and it made all the difference. They stepped up. They trusted God despite their fears, and they got to see the land that God had promised. And we want you to experience the life that God has planned for you too. So this week, remember, when you feel afraid, God can be trusted.